They pulled her over for looking nervous. But when she called her father, a superior court judge listening live, everything they thought they controlled began to fall apart. The wipers dragged across the windshield with a tired rhythm, the kind that almost lulled you to sleep if you weren't careful. It had been one of those long, grey afternoons in Macon, Georgia, where the clouds just refused to break. Tiana Cormier had just wrapped up a 3-hour meeting that could have been an email. She was mentally exhausted and hungry. All she wanted was to get home, change into sweatpants, and microwave the leftover shrimp pasta from last night. The office lot had cleared out early. Folks don't like driving in rain, especially the kind that keeps whispering warnings through the trees. She wasn't in a rush, though. Tiana was the type who did everything by the book. Blinkers on time, speed under control, 2 hands on the wheel. She was somewhere between Grey and Eatonton Road, right before that long stretch near that worn-down Exxon with the busted lights, when she saw the headlights behind her shift. Closer, brighter. She checked her rearview mirror. Police. She signaled and pulled over without hesitation. No music, no movement, just her breathing and the rain. A second car pulled up behind the first. 2 officers stepped out. One stood back, hand on his belt. The other approached slowly, boots crunching on wet gravel. Tiana rolled down her window halfway. "Good afternoon, officer." The cop didn't respond. He just looked at her for a second, then asked flatly, "License and registration?" "Of course," she said, reaching for the glove box, then pausing. "Just so you know, I'm reaching for my registration in the glove compartment." No reply. He took the documents wordlessly and walked back to his cruiser. Tiana sat still. No radio, no phone, just her hands on her lap. She noticed her heart beating a little faster than usual, but she'd done nothing wrong. 10 minutes passed. That's when the second officer walked up. A younger one, maybe in his 30s. His face was tight. "Ma'am, can you step out of the vehicle?" She blinked. "I'm sorry? What's going on?" "You were asked to step out, now." "But, officer, I haven't been told why I was pulled over." The first officer returned. "Step out of the car, now." She unbuckled. Stepped out. Shoes soaked instantly in the puddled gravel. Her blazer clung to her arms from the humidity. She didn't argue. She just looked at them, waiting for something that resembled logic. Instead, the taller officer said, "Turn around." "I don't understand," she said calmly. "I just came from a meeting. I haven't done anything." "You're being detained. Don't resist." "Detained for what?" He grabbed her wrist. That's when the voices started nearby. Someone from the gas station across the road had started filming. Another man on the sidewalk yelled, "She didn't do anything!" "Why are you all cuffing her?" someone else called out. But the officers didn't flinch. One cuffed her. The other took her phone from her hand and set it on the hood of the car. Tiana's voice cracked. "Please, I haven't done anything." She glanced down at her smartwatch. Thank God she had it on. Her finger tapped quickly, twice. Calling Dad. But what her father heard on the other end of that call was enough to make everything stop. Leonard Cormier was wrapping up a meeting with a juvenile defense attorney when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, ready to ignore the alert, until he saw the name, Tiana. Audio call. "Watch," he answered immediately. "Tiana?" Static. Then a shaky voice. "Daddy, they're cuffing me. I don't know why." Leonard stood from his chair so fast his knees cracked. "What? Where are you?" "I'm near Eatonton Road. I was pulled over. I gave them everything. I asked what was wrong and they just told me to step out." He could hear voices in the background. Male, stern. One said something about resisting. He could also hear people yelling. Strangers. Witnesses. Leonard's tone dropped to something cold and quiet. "Keep the line open. Don't hang up." She didn't respond, but he knew she heard him. He could feel it. He grabbed his coat, signaled to his assistant with just a glance, and left the courthouse in Augusta without another word. On his way to the elevator, the call continued in his ear. "Sir, I'm not resisting," Tiana's voice pleaded in the background. "Why are you doing this?" "You were acting suspicious," one officer said, voice sharp and dismissive. "How? I was sitting in my car." "We'll sort it out downtown." "I'm a project manager." I just left a client's site. The younger cop scoffed. Don't care if you're the mayor. The call was still live. Leonard clenched the steering wheel the way he hadn't since his early days in courtrooms. He didn't care that the rain was heavier now. His car sliced through it like it wasn't even there. Meanwhile, Tiana was placed in the back seat of the cruiser. She glanced at the officer sitting in front. Why are you doing this? I didn't even get a reason for the stop. He turned his head slowly. You looked nervous. Her mouth opened, then closed. So looking nervous is cause for arrest? You refused to comply. I asked you a question, and you got an answer. She stared at the back of his head. No words, just air, tight in her throat. Back on the other end of the line, Leonard was dialing a second number on his other phone. It rang twice. Darlene, he said to his longtime friend and editor at the Columbus Ledger-Inquirer, I need you to do something for me. There's a situation happening right now. My daughter was pulled over outside Macon. I think it's about to go public in the worst way. She knew that tone. She didn't ask questions. Send me what you got. He kept the audio call live, transferred it via Bluetooth, and forwarded her a recording from the courthouse line. By the time he parked in front of a state rep's house 15 minutes later, Darlene already had a statement drafted. But back in the car, Tiana sat soaked and quiet. The officer who arrested her got out, opened her door, and said, We're taking you in for further questioning. For what? She asked again. Calm. Controlled. Her mother taught her never to raise her voice unless it meant saving a life. You'll get your answer when we're ready to give it. Another voice called out behind them. Let her go! A woman yelled across the parking lot. We got it all on camera! Another person chimed in. Y'all doing too much. She ain't do nothing. Phones pointed at them like flashlights in the dark. The officers didn't like it. One of them turned to the crowd, barking, Back up or you'll be interfering. But nobody backed up. Tiana made eye contact with a girl, maybe college age, holding her phone steady, eyes wide but focused. That girl nodded. It gave Tiana something to hold on to. Back in the patrol car, she turned her head and whispered to her wrist, Daddy, still there? I'm here, baby. She exhaled for just a second. But neither of them had any idea how fast this was about to spiral, not just for Tiana, but for the men who thought no one was watching. The rain kept tapping against the windows like a metronome that wouldn't quit. Tiana sat cuffed in the back seat of the patrol car, soaked, humiliated, and confused. Her blazer was damp from the downpour, her heels covered in muddy water. But what stung the most wasn't the weather. It was the silence. She stared straight ahead, not even trying to wipe the strands of hair sticking to her cheeks. The officer in the passenger seat typed something into the car's dashboard system. The other one leaned on the hood, arms crossed, watching the small crowd across the road. Tiana could feel her watch vibrating on her wrist again. The call to her father was still connected. Still with me? She whispered, just low enough so only the device could pick it up. Still here. Leonard's voice came through, even and firm. She couldn't see his face, but she could picture it. Eyebrows furrowed, that same crease between his eyes he got whenever someone lied in court. Her whole life she'd seen that look tear holes through false testimony and petty manipulation. Now it was pointed in one direction. These two men with badges who didn't know whose daughter they'd just manhandled. Leonard sat at his desk, suit jacket off, tie loosened, phone cradled between shoulder and ear while he clicked through a secure court database on his laptop. He already had both officers' badge numbers, thanks to the faint background chatter on the call. He ran them through the court's internal inquiry system. Officer Mark Densley, 8 complaints over the last 5 years, 5 from women, all closed without disciplinary action. Officer Peter Givens, 2 excessive force reports, both filed during protests last summer, cleared after review. Leonard muttered, Of course. He called his colleague at the Attorney General's office. No pleasantries, just facts. My daughter was just detained outside Macon. Illegally. I'm listening to it live. Do you want me to... No statements yet, but I want eyes on it. Every angle. Every camera. Back inside the patrol car, the officers still hadn't said a word to Tiana. She finally spoke. Am I being arrested? Silence. Can I get a reason for the stop? More silence. Her voice raised, just a notch. I'd like to call my attorney. We're heading downtown. You'll have time there. I already made a call, she said. The officer in the passenger seat turned slightly. To who? To my father. He smirked. And who's he going to call? The mayor? No, the judge. That got his attention. You're a judge's daughter. Superior Court, Augusta Judicial Circuit. The cop looked at the other officer outside. His expression changed, but not to fear. To something more cautious. They were already too deep. Cameras had caught it all. And now they had context. But Leonard wasn't banking on Tiana dropping his name. He never taught her to do that. She didn't grow up on status. She grew up on values. That's what made the call sting even more. She wasn't one to ask for rescue. So if she had, things were bad. Leonard's hand hovered over his desk. He thought for a second, then called his longtime clerk, Marcus Delgado. I need a transcript request from Macon County Dispatch. Right now. I want every unit that logged a stop near Eatonton Road between 4 and 5:30. You got it, Marcus said. Leonard paused. And send it to Darlene as well. Back at the scene, a third patrol car pulled up. A sergeant stepped out, heavy-set. Mid-50s. Mustache like a sheriff in an old western. He looked around, glanced at the crowd, then made a beeline for the cruiser Tiana was in. He tapped on the window. The officer inside rolled it down. The sergeant leaned in. Unlock her cuffs. What? Do it. But I said now. The officer obeyed, fumbling with the latch. Tiana pulled her wrists forward slowly. The cuffs came off with a quiet clink. Her skin was red where the metal had pressed. She looked at the sergeant. He didn't apologize. Didn't offer an explanation. Ma'am, you're free to go, he said. We're reviewing the incident. You may be contacted for a statement. She stared at him, unmoving. You're free, he repeated, eyes flicking toward the crowd still filming. Tiana opened the door herself and stepped out. Her clothes clung to her. Her eyes scanned the people across the road. Still filming, still watching. One man shouted, Y'all better hope that woman sues. She picked up her phone off the hood of her car. The rain had slowed to a drizzle now. The thunder moved somewhere far in the distance. She pressed the watch again. Dad? I heard everything. She didn't say anything. Didn't have to. But silence doesn't mean surrender. And by morning, silence would be the last thing anyone heard from the Cormiers. Leonard didn't sleep that night. Not a minute. He sat at his kitchen table in Augusta, files spread out like a battlefield. The coffee pot had long gone cold. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. But his mind was on fire. He'd replayed the call 10 times already. Every tone, every pause, every crack in his daughter's voice. He was a judge, a man who'd spent 3 decades behind a bench, weighing facts, picking apart lies, and watching the system grind good people down like meat in a grinder. But never, not once, had he imagined the system would come for his own child so blatantly, so casually, with such indifference. And she'd handled it with more grace than most grown men he'd seen on the witness stand. He clicked over to his laptop. The footage was already making rounds on social media. 3 separate angles. 2 from across the road, and 1 up close, from a woman who stayed filming even when an officer told her to back up. Tiana's voice was clear in one of the videos. Why am I being detained? And just as clearly, the cop saying, Because you're acting nervous. That was it. That's all it took. He didn't need to manufacture outrage. The videos spoke for themselves. But Leonard didn't want viral attention. He wanted consequences. At 6:42 a.m., he placed a call to District Attorney Curtis Bain. Curtis picked up groggily. Leonard? Check your inbox. What am I looking for? A mistake. There was a beat of silence, then some shuffling, the sound of a laptop waking up. Oh, that's your daughter. Leonard didn't answer. Jesus. I want a formal investigation, not internal affairs, not a review, a real inquiry, transparent, public. Curtis rubbed his eyes. You want to make it official? I want you to do your job. Curtis was quiet for a moment. Let me talk to the mayor. Good. because I'm not giving any interviews yet. Meanwhile, Tiana was back at her condo, drying her shoes on a towel near the door. She hadn't changed out of her damp clothes yet. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed every few seconds, texts from co-workers, old college friends, people she hadn't spoken to in years. "Was that really you in the video? I just saw what happened. I'm so sorry. What can I do?" She didn't answer any of them. She just kept refreshing her news feed. By 8 a.m. the headline was everywhere. "Young black professional handcuffed without cause in Macon. Caught on camera." She read the first line 3 times, then tossed the phone on the bed. She wasn't angry yet. She was still too confused. It hadn't even been 24 hours. Her dad called. "You all right?" he asked. "I'm okay. Just tired." "You slept?" "No." "Eat something." "I will." There was a pause. "I made a few calls," Leonard said. She expected that. She also knew what that meant. "Do you want this to be public?" he asked. "I don't know. If you want to let it go, I'll stop right now." She closed her eyes. "I don't want revenge, Daddy. I just don't want them to do it to someone else." He nodded, even though she couldn't see him. That's all I needed to hear. By mid-morning, the story had picked up national traction. A civil rights attorney from Alabama posted the video with the caption, "This is what systemic profiling looks like. Right here, on camera. No room for excuses." News vans began pulling up near the Macon Police Department. The mayor's office issued a brief statement. "We are aware of the video and are reviewing the circumstances." Leonard watched it all without blinking. He wasn't interested in public noise. He was interested in paperwork, policy, and precedent. He called a state legislator he'd known for 2 decades. "You watching the news?" "I saw it. I want every officer involved reviewed. Past incidents, closed cases, use of force history. Everything. I can make that happen. Don't let it drag. They're going to stall if you let them." "I won't." He hung up. Then he made one more call. It rang twice. "Morning, Leonard," said Sheriff Arnold Deeks. "We've got a problem," Leonard said. "And it's about to get worse if someone doesn't start taking accountability." The sheriff sighed. "You've got my attention." But attention wasn't enough. Not this time. Leonard wasn't just building pressure. He was laying down track for something permanent, something no department statement could sweep away. By lunchtime, it was everywhere. The video of Tiana, her voice calm but firm, her arms pulled behind her back in the rain, had clocked over 2.3 million views in just 6 hours. The hashtags were multiplying. Tiana Cormier, Macon traffic stop, why? It wasn't just activists posting it now. News anchors, podcast hosts, even suburban moms with lifestyle blogs were sharing the clip with captions like, "This could have been my daughter." In the video, you could hear it clear as day. Her question, "Can you please tell me why I'm being detained?" And the answer, "You were acting nervous." People were furious. There were no raised voices, no threats, no weapons, no resistance. Just a black woman asking for a reason. And 2 cops acting like she owed them silence. By 1:15 p.m., the mayor's office issued a second statement, this time longer and clearly more panicked. "We are conducting a full review of the incident and have placed the officers involved on temporary administrative leave pending the outcome of that review. We understand the public's concern and want to assure the community that transparency is our priority." Tiana read it once. Then again. She didn't believe a word of it. Meanwhile, her father was doing what he did best, quietly pulling strings. At a private luncheon with 3 sitting judges and a state senator, Leonard leaned forward and said, "If this doesn't lead to disciplinary action, every one of you will be answering questions from the press by Monday. I'll make sure of it." He didn't say it with malice, just clarity. And when Leonard Cormier spoke that way, people listened. Back in Macon, the police chief, Everett Gaines, was in full damage control mode. He'd seen public fires before, but this was different. It wasn't just another incident. It was a full-blown PR crisis, and it had a face, a name, a background, a father with connections. And that terrified him more than any viral clip. His office rang every 15 minutes, requests for comment. CNN, ABC, even Good Morning America. He finally called Officer Densley into his office. "Why didn't you de-escalate?" the chief asked. Densley sat across from him, arms crossed. "She had an attitude." "Attitude isn't probable cause, Mark. She didn't follow instructions. You told her to get out before giving a reason. That's not procedure. I didn't feel safe. She was wearing a damn blazer." Densley didn't respond. The chief leaned back. "I can't cover this one, not with who her father is. You gonna hang me out to dry? I'm gonna let the facts hang whoever they need to. If they come for you, you're on your own." Across the state, at a public defender's office in Athens, a group of junior attorneys pulled the video up during lunch. One of them, a young black woman named Jasmine, shook her head slowly. "She handled it better than I would have. She sounded like she was at work," another said. "Didn't even raise her voice. Still got cuffed. Still got humiliated." By late afternoon, Tiana's inbox had 217 unread messages. Some from journalists, some from complete strangers. A few from former classmates saying they were proud of her. She ignored most of them. Her mother came over with warm food and quiet hugs, the kind where nothing needs to be said. As night fell again, Tiana stood by her window, watching the city lights flicker. It still didn't feel real. She hadn't even cried yet. Not out of pride, but because her body was still locked in survival mode. Everything inside her was tightly wound. She knew the tears would come later, maybe when no one was watching. Back at Leonard's house, a meeting was taking place. Not in an office, not in a courtroom. Just 5 people, 2 civil rights attorneys, a retired detective, a state rep, and Leonard, gathered in his study, reading over the officer's personnel files. The retired detective, Raymond Brooks, looked up from the sheet. "Densley's been a problem. I flagged him 3 years ago when I was still on the force." "And no one acted?" Leonard asked. "They said it didn't meet the threshold." That phrase again. "Didn't rise to the level." Leonard nodded. "Well, it's risen now." The younger attorney across the table smiled slightly. "You planning to sue?" Leonard shook his head. "Not unless they force our hand." "What do you want?" "I want them accountable. I want every department across this state to see that these things don't get swept under anymore. I want my daughter to feel safe again in her own car." Raymond tapped the folder. "That might take more than just paperwork." Leonard met his eyes. "Then we better get started." But even as they plotted accountability, one officer had already made his next move, and it wasn't toward reflection. It was toward defiance. Officer Densley wasn't the type to apologize. Not to strangers, not to supervisors, and certainly not to a black woman he believed had tested his authority. While the world dissected every second of his body language from those videos, Densley sat in a bar just outside Warner Robins, shoulders hunched, sipping cheap bourbon and talking too loud. "They're making me the face of everything that's wrong with this damn country," he grumbled to another off-duty cop, a buddy from academy days. "One video, and suddenly I'm the poster boy for racism." His friend stared into his beer, silent. No defense, no argument, just distance. Densley didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care. Across the state, the conversation was different. Mayor Calvin Rowe was pacing in his office. The walls of City Hall felt tighter than usual. The assistant city attorney had just briefed him on the phone. "This could cost us more than just PR, sir. There's legal exposure here." Mayor Rowe sat down heavily. He wasn't built for crisis. He was a manager, not a leader, and this storm was growing too fast for slow hands. "Who knew she was a judge's daughter?" he asked. "We should have," his chief of staff replied. "Her name's on 4 corporate advisory boards, and she's spoken at city functions." "Then why the hell didn't anyone stop this before it blew up?" No one answered. There was nothing to say. Meanwhile, Leonard was meeting with the Macon City Council president behind closed doors in a law office near the courthouse. "I'm not asking for special treatment," he said calmly. "I'm asking for fairness, for decency." 2 officers escalated without cause. And if there weren't cameras, my daughter would be in a cell instead of a headline. Council President Miriam Dobbs was a pragmatic woman. She'd spent her career mediating between departments and community leaders. But this one had her pinned. "What are you asking me to do? Push for a public oversight committee?" civilian-led, independent. You know how long that process takes? Then start it, because I'm not the only one watching anymore. Miriam nodded. She knew he was right. The pressure was real. Protesters were already marching near City Hall. The local news covered a group of college students holding signs that read, "Asking why isn't a crime. We are Tiana. Fire Densley now." Inside the police department, Chief Gaines met with his legal counsel and 2 department captains. The topic wasn't whether to discipline Officer Densley, it was how to do it without admitting guilt. "We can't just throw him under the bus," one captain argued. Gaines shot back. "He threw himself under. Policy says we review all excessive force claims through internal channels." "This isn't internal anymore," Gaines said. "The public's involved. The cameras are involved. Her father's involved. You want this to turn into a lawsuit? Or worse?" The captain looked away. Back in Augusta, Tiana sat across from her father in the living room. She'd changed out of the suit, hair tied back. Still looked like the girl who'd used to line up her books alphabetically by author in middle school. "You sure you're okay with how public this is getting?" Leonard asked. "I didn't ask for it," she said. "But I'm not running from it either." He nodded. "There are people lining up behind you now." "I don't want them to do it for me. I want them to do it for the next person." He smiled faintly. "You always were the practical one." They sat quietly for a moment. Tiana broke the silence. "Do you think they'll actually be held accountable?" Leonard didn't answer right away. "If I have anything to do with it, they will." That same hour, Darlene, the reporter Leonard had contacted, published a new piece. "Judge's daughter detained without cause. What happened in Macon and why it matters." It went viral within 2 hours. Darlene had receipts, dispatch logs, past complaints, a full timeline of the event. She didn't sensationalize it. She laid it bare. And that's when the first real crack formed. The governor's office issued a brief statement saying they supported full transparency in all cases involving possible police misconduct. Leonard read it, then leaned back in his chair. They weren't backing the officers anymore. They were backing the process, which meant the process was finally on the table. But process alone doesn't bring justice. Not unless someone is willing to drag it out into the light and demand that it moves faster. Leonard was just getting started. It started with a meeting that wasn't on the calendar. At 8:03 a.m., Officer Peter Givens walked into the Macon Police Department and asked to speak with Internal Affairs. No lawyer, no backup, just a man who looked like he hadn't slept. He sat down, folded his hands on the table, and said, "I want to talk about what happened." Detective Susan O'Neill raised an eyebrow. "You're sure you want to give a voluntary statement?" "I am." She hit record. Givens admitted the stop was unnecessary. He said Officer Densley had grown agitated from the moment they saw Tiana's car, claiming she looked like she was hiding something. Givens hadn't questioned it. He followed Densley's lead. "I knew it didn't feel right," he said, "but I didn't speak up. That's on me." He described how Densley had been the one to insist she exit the vehicle without explanation, how he cuffed her while ignoring her repeated questions, how the crowd formed, and how both of them ignored protocol, knowing cameras were on them. By 10 a.m., Givens had been placed on immediate leave, pending further disciplinary review. But it wasn't punishment. It was cooperation. And everyone in the building knew it. At home, Tiana got the news through a text from her father. Givens cracked, gave a full statement. Densley's exposed. She sat on the edge of the couch, phone in hand, staring at the words. Her mother, Denise, was folding laundry nearby. "They're starting to turn on each other," Tiana said. Denise paused, then looked at her daughter carefully. "That's when people get desperate." She was right. That same afternoon, Densley met with a police union rep behind closed doors. He wasn't calm anymore. The arrogance had drained from his face, replaced by something tighter. Not quite fear, but close. "They're throwing me to the wolves," he said. The rep shook his head. "You handed them the rope. You know that, right?" "I did what I was trained to do." "No, you didn't. You did what you wanted to do, and now they're distancing themselves." Densley paced the small office, fists clenched. "I'm not going down alone." The rep leaned forward. Don't make this worse for yourself. Outside the station, a small group of local residents were gathered with handmade signs. They weren't yelling, just standing. Silent. Determined. One read, "She stayed calm. They didn't." Another, "We saw everything." By evening, the police department released an updated statement acknowledging procedural violations during the stop. They confirmed that Officer Givens had cooperated and that disciplinary proceedings were underway. But there was still no mention of suspension for Densley. That was a mistake. Within hours, the community responded. Macon Central High's students walked out of class in protest. Local churches held back-to-back prayer vigils that turned into strategy meetings. A city councilwoman publicly demanded Densley's immediate termination. And across it all, Leonard stayed quiet, watching, collecting, listening. In his office, he flipped through a thin folder, an incident report from 2 years prior, where Densley had detained a teenage boy outside a corner store for looking nervous. No charges. No bodycam footage ever recovered. It had been closed in 2 weeks. Leonard circled the file number in red. At 7:45 p.m., the Macon Daily News broke a new story. Officer Densley under review for multiple incidents. Pattern of misconduct alleged. This time, it wasn't just Tiana's name in the headline. It was the whole town watching their police department get laid bare. The mayor called Leonard directly that night. No staff, no advisors, just one-on-one. "Leonard, we're reviewing Densley's position tonight. You'll have a formal update by morning." Leonard didn't thank him. He simply said, "You should have done that yesterday." The line went quiet. At Tiana's apartment, the knock came around 8:30. It was Raymond Brooks, the retired detective Leonard had brought into the fold. She opened the door, surprised. "Raymond? I just wanted to tell you this in person," he said. "Tomorrow morning, you'll get an official apology. From the department, from the city. All of it." She didn't say anything at first. Then, "Why now? Because people like your dad don't bluff. And because you didn't scream, you didn't swing, you just asked a question, and the whole country heard it." She nodded slowly. "I didn't think it would matter." He shook his head. "That's how they win. Making you think it won't matter." But it did. But apologies are words. And Tiana had learned, especially this week, that real change doesn't come with words. It comes with actions and with consequences that stick. At exactly 9 a.m., the Macon Police Department held a press conference in front of City Hall. Podium. Flags. Uniforms stiff with starch. The kind of setup meant to project control, though everyone watching could sense the desperation underneath. Chief Everett Gaines stepped up to the microphone, flanked by the city manager and the mayor. The crowd of reporters was thick. Local stations, national outlets, even a live stream crew from The Guardian. Gaines adjusted the mic. His voice was low, tight. After reviewing the events of the incident involving Ms. Tiana Cormier, and after receiving statements, video evidence, and internal findings, we are confirming that Officer Mark Densley has been suspended without pay, effective immediately. An internal investigation remains ongoing. We will cooperate fully with any outside inquiry. No apology, no accountability in the phrasing, just bureaucratic breath. But the crowd didn't miss the key word: suspended. A reporter from WSB asked, "Why not fired?" The chief's lips pressed thin. "Department policy requires due process. That process is underway." Another voice shouted, "What about criminal charges?" "We're not discussing that at this time." Tiana watched from her apartment, arms crossed. She didn't feel vindicated. She felt studied, picked apart, analyzed, as if she were the one under review. Her phone buzzed. Her father. "You watching?" he asked. "Yeah." He didn't say sorry. He won't. But his hands are tied now. Tiana sighed. "It feels like they're trying to make it go away quietly." Leonard didn't answer, because she wasn't wrong. Meanwhile, Officer Givens had hired legal counsel, not to fight anything, but to protect himself while cooperating further. The department viewed him now as both a liability and a witness. He'd agreed to sit down with the State Integrity Board the following week. Privately, city officials were bracing for lawsuits. At least 2 other residents had come forward since the story broke, sharing their own experiences with Densley. Both involved traffic stops. Both described similar intimidation. Neither had been believed, until now. The mayor held a closed-door emergency session that afternoon with 3 council members and the city attorney. There was only one agenda item: how to limit the city's exposure without looking like they were sweeping the whole mess under the rug. They considered offering Tiana a settlement quietly through a civil outreach program, but Leonard got wind of it immediately and shut it down. "She's not for sale," he told the city attorney over the phone. "We're trying to avoid drawn-out litigation." "Then don't violate citizens' rights." Click. By late afternoon, the department issued another short release. Officer Densley had agreed to resign, effective immediately. The wording was careful, muted. Voluntary separation. But everyone knew what it really meant. It meant he saw the wall coming and chose the back door. The media moved fast. Within the hour, headlines read, "Officer in viral traffic stop resigns amid outcry. Macon police facing scrutiny after resignation. Father's quiet fight forces department shakeup." But Leonard didn't claim credit. He refused interviews, declined TV appearances. When asked to appear on a national morning show, he responded simply, "This isn't a story for entertainment." Instead, he met with local clergy and youth organizations to talk about the long game: oversight reform, traffic stop policies, and community response systems. That night, Tiana received an email from her company's CEO. Short, sincere. "We stand by you. Your professionalism and composure have reminded us what dignity under pressure looks like." She stared at the message for a long time. Then she shut the laptop and walked to the balcony. The air was cool. Finally, for the first time all week, she breathed without having to measure it. Below, the city moved on. Cars flowed, dogs barked. People lived their lives. But somewhere in the middle of that normalcy, her name had become part of the city's story. At dinner, she and her father sat in silence for a bit, eating fried catfish and greens that her mom had brought over. No speeches, no legal updates, just family. Tiana finally asked, "Do you think people will forget?" Leonard wiped his mouth with a napkin. "Some will. That's the nature of news. But some won't. And that's who we do it for." She nodded. "I didn't want any of this." "I know. I just wanted to get home." He looked at her gently. "Now you've helped make sure someone else will." But even as the headlines faded and the attention moved on, the impact didn't. The real change was just beginning, and it started not with protests or power plays, but with a woman asking one simple question. The following Monday, the elevator doors opened to the 10th floor of Cortland & Rison Consulting. Tiana stepped out, wearing a light grey blouse and pressed navy slacks. No announcement, no fanfare, just her ID badge clipped to her hip and a soft leather bag slung over one shoulder. Her heels made their usual sharp taps against the tile, drawing a few glances from the cubicles. Some colleagues whispered, others watched from behind monitors. A few stood and greeted her with cautious smiles, unsure if she wanted to be noticed. She gave a polite nod to most, a quiet "good morning" to others. Then she walked straight into the project suite, dropped her bag, and opened her laptop. Maya, one of the junior analysts, peeked through the door after a few minutes. "Hey," she said gently. "Glad to see you back." "Thanks," Tiana replied, eyes still on her screen. There was a pause. "If you ever want to talk." "I'm good," Tiana said. Not cold, just focused. Maya hesitated, then stepped out. It wasn't that Tiana didn't appreciate the support. She just didn't want to become the walking headline in the office. She didn't want to be that girl from the video. She wanted to do her job, submit her reports, finish her audits, and go home without needing to explain anything to anyone. By lunchtime, her inbox was nearly cleared. Her calendar full again. Client calls were back on the schedule, but the silence around her wasn't lost. Conversations paused when she entered a room. Eyes darted when she passed the break area. She wasn't angry, just tired. Tiana took her break in the conference room, where she could sit alone. She poured some tea, opened her notebook, and let her pen slide across the page. Not work notes, not legal points, just thoughts, reflections. What it felt like to be handled without explanation. What it felt like to hear her father's voice in her ear while metal clicked around her wrists. The door creaked open. This time it was Marcus, the firm's director of operations. "Mind if I sit?" She shrugged. "Up to you." He sat down, didn't speak for a moment, then finally said, "I was angry when I saw the video." Tiana looked up. Most people were shocked. "I wasn't shocked," he said. "I was angry, because I've seen that happen too many times. Just never to someone I knew personally." She said nothing. "I'm not going to ask if you're okay. That question's not useful right now," he added. She half smiled. "Thanks for that." He stood. "If you need to take time, take it. If you want more work, I'll give it. Just don't feel like you have to carry this for everyone else." Tiana nodded. "I won't." When he left, she exhaled. It was the first moment all day she'd felt like herself. Outside the office, the media cycle had already shifted. New headlines, new controversies. Tiana's story had faded from the front page, but it hadn't disappeared completely. A few podcasts were still discussing it. Civil rights blogs still referenced it. A local college planned to use the video in a sociology course next semester. Leonard had turned down all remaining interview requests. He said what needed to be said. The rest, he left alone. He'd resumed work at the courthouse, quiet as ever, issuing rulings and mentoring new clerks. But something in him had shifted too. He started pushing for reforms in ways he never had before. More civilian oversight in traffic stops, clearer body cam protocols, a zero-tolerance policy for unreported complaints. Small changes, but real ones. One afternoon, he received a handwritten letter from a woman in Savannah whose son had been stopped by the same officer 3 years earlier. "They didn't listen to me back then," she wrote. "But they're listening now, because of what your daughter endured. Thank you for not being silent." Leonard read it 3 times, then folded it and placed it in a drawer with only a few other items. A photo of Tiana at her college graduation, a small silver pocket watch from his father, and the first court order he ever signed as a judge. He didn't need applause. He just wanted change. And Tiana? She didn't want a spotlight. She wanted peace. A return to the normal rhythms of life. Morning traffic, project deadlines, family dinners on Sundays. But deep down, she knew she would never look at flashing blue lights the same way again. And maybe that was the cost. But even with that weight, she carried herself forward, not for recognition, but to reclaim the dignity that should have never been questioned in the first place. 3 months later, Judge Leonard Cormier stood at the edge of a modest stage inside the Augusta Municipal Hall, adjusting the sleeves of his dark suit. The room was filled with state officials, law clerks, former colleagues, and quiet supporters who'd followed his career from the beginning. It wasn't a flashy ceremony. There were no camera crews, no media circus, just a microphone, a modest reception, and a single table of black and white photographs capturing Leonard's decades in law. The occasion? His retirement. 52,000 cases reviewed. More than 3,100 court opinions issued. 27 years behind the bench. He could have stayed longer, but he didn't want to. When the applause faded, Leonard stepped up to the mic. "I never wanted to become a judge for recognition," he began. "I did it because I believed in what justice could be, not just what it was. And that belief has been tested again and again." He paused, scanning the room slowly. Some nodded. Others just listened. "But I want to tell you what reminded me why I started this work in the first place. It wasn't a courtroom. It wasn't a landmark case. It was a phone call. From my daughter." You could have heard a pin drop. She called me while 2 men were putting her in handcuffs for asking a question. That's all she did. She asked why, and they didn't like it. That phone call wasn't just about fear. It was a test. A test of whether justice ends at the edge of a badge, or if it begins when someone says, "That's enough." He looked down briefly, then back up. Since that day, people have asked if I acted because she was my daughter. Of course I did. But not just because of who she is, because of what she stands for. Because when she asked why, she spoke for every person who's ever been told to sit down, be quiet, and accept mistreatment like it's part of the contract. Someone in the back wiped their eyes. Leonard finished. I'm leaving the bench, but I'm not leaving the fight, because justice doesn't wear a robe. And it sure as hell doesn't wear silence. The room stood. No fanfare, just respect. After the ceremony, Tiana helped him gather his things from the chambers. They walked together in silence, his leather briefcase swinging lightly at his side, her heels soft against the hallway floor. Feels strange? She asked. He looked around. It doesn't feel like mine anymore. That means it's time. Outside, they stood by his car. The late afternoon sun made the pavement shimmer. Tiana turned to him. You did more than most people ever will. He gave a small smile. So did you, she chuckled. All I did was ask a question. Sometimes, he said. That's the hardest thing to do. Back in Macon, the city had implemented new policies for traffic stops. Officers were now required to state the reason for a stop before asking a driver to exit their vehicle unless there was immediate threat. Civilian oversight committees had been approved. And Officer Densley? No law enforcement agency in the state would touch his application. Tiana never saw him again. She didn't want to. Instead, she focused on her work. She kept her head down, led projects, trained interns, and gave a quiet guest lecture at a local college on crisis management. She never spoke publicly about the incident. Not once. But she noticed changes. People stopped asking what she did for a living and started listening when she answered. She was no longer someone's daughter. She was someone with a voice. On a Sunday morning, she and Leonard met at a park bench between their homes, coffee cups in hand. You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't answered? She asked. He shook his head. No, because I did. They sat in silence for a while, watching joggers pass by, kids screaming on the playground, birds darting across the trees. She finally said, That day changed a lot. For you? For everyone. He didn't respond. He just reached out, held her hand lightly, and nodded. Because sometimes one moment, one sentence, can tip the scales. Not because it's loud, not because it's dramatic, but because it refuses to disappear. And justice, real justice, begins in those quiet refusals. If this story moved you, speak up when you see wrong. Share it with someone who thinks one voice doesn't matter. And don't forget to subscribe, because these are the stories that remind us we're not powerless.